Hey everybody, it's Derek here. We're going to take a look at the news from the 11th to the 17th of October 2021. So, no big news story, I guess, to start the show off with. We're pretty much just going to go straight to the show. We're pretty much going to go straight to new releases. I wanted to do some stuff on the DC fandom that's going on at the moment. They are showing off trailers for Rocksteady's next Batman universe game, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But the trailer that's come out for it, at least so far, shows no gameplay. So we actually know nothing really new about that game. And similarly, the Court of Owls game, the other Batman game being done by Warner Bros. Montreal, is similarly just has no actual gameplay in the trailer. So I don't really feel arsed, to be perfectly honest. So instead, we're just going to go straight to new releases. So first up, The Good Life from Swery. If you're not familiar, Swery made Deadly Premonition, as well as a bunch of other games, but that's probably the one he's best known for. This title was a Kickstarter title, and full disclosure, I backed it, and I'm currently waiting to play it myself. The Good Life follows a New York photojournalist who is relocated to some bumfuck village out in the English countryside somewhere to basically repay a massive debt that they've accrued. And to do so, they have to investigate some kind of strange secret goings-on that are happening in this village. One of them being a murder mystery of some kind, the other being the townsfolk turn into cats and dogs randomly, just at night, possibly with the full moon. I'm not sure the actual mechanic itself, but yeah. But otherwise, it is a pretty much really, really weird and really kind of comedic game, and is very typical sweary nonsense, basically. Yeah, you could try it out yourselves. I haven't played it myself, so I don't know exactly how it's gonna play or how it's gonna feel. Is it gonna be a bit grindy because there is like a massive debt you need to pay off as well, which is like taking pictures and doing odd jobs about the place and that sort of thing. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. The other bigger-ish, I guess, release is the Crysis Remastered Trilogy. I've never played Crysis, so all of these games will be brand new to me. I never had a PC that could run Crysis, what can I tell you? And I never owned an Xbox, so yeah, that's where we were at on it. I don't think it ever came out on PlayStation. It might have, I don't know. It always kind of looked like a sort of grim military shooter type thing, but I've seen like a couple of outlets have been doing like sponsored streams of the Remastered Trilogy or whatever. And sure, they're sponsored streams, but just looking at the gameplay, it does look fun, and there aren't too many great first-person shooters out at the moment, so I'm kind of thinking of getting it. I don't know. Like, my usual conceit with first-person shooters is you have to do something other than just be a first-person shooter. And like Crysis does have those additional nanosuit powers, you know, like you can go invisible and you have super strength and super speed and that kind of thing. So it does have that additional caveat that I usually apply to first-person shooters. I think Doom is about the only one that I allowed get away with it, and even then, Doom was doing a lot of additional things that's not just shooting. I'd probably lump Bioshock in the same sense, like you had, you know, the plasmid powers, and I would lump Deus Ex in the same sense because Deus Ex was an interactive sim. I suppose the interactive sim thing is probably how it gets away with it. Deus Ex, Prey, Bioshock, System Shock, all of those kind of games, they are technically first-person shooters, but they're doing a lot more to it than just shooting. Like, I think in Deus Ex, if you're shooting, you're probably playing the game wrong. So it's probably got that going for it. Okay. And much earlier than usual, but it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, the video game industry. So there's kind of been a lot of news about EA and the FIFA license kind of going around this entire week. Normally I don't particularly care, but I have brought up a bunch of EA's kind of shittiness around FIFA already. on this video series, so I figured I would just keep going with it. Sure, why not? So basically, EA and FIFA are having a pissing contest. So this would be FIFA, the non-profit organization, rather than FIFA, the video game. Obviously, why would EA have a pissing contest with itself? But anyway, so coming off this week, FIFA is going to be issuing a statement after negotiations with EA have hit an impasse. So earlier in the week, EA released a press release to kind of point out that they're considering renaming the series to something very lacking in imagination. They wanted to rename it to EA Sports Football Club. And the fact that it had so little imagination should probably clue you into it just being a PR thing. This was aimed mostly at FIFA rather than at the actual public. This was more EA kind of saying to FIFA that we don't really need the FIFA name. You know, we could get along just fine without it, kind of thing. So if you really don't want that money, okay, that's fine. We'll find somebody else or just run it ourselves. FIFA have come back to say that they don't feel that, or rather, it believes that football gaming and esports must involve more than one party controlling and exploiting all the rights. Unless that one party is FIFA, I guess, because they can control all the rights to that, whatever. EA exploring idea of renaming it, which was really just a kind of negotiating tactic. So one of the biggest areas of disagreements is that FIFA is looking for $1 billion for every 4-year World Cup cycle. And these contracts tend to be a 10-year thing, so that would be like $2.5 billion, which is double the current cost for the FIFA license. So there's one way to look at this in that basically FIFA are kind of wanting to license out the FIFA license. I'm terrible today. FIFA wants to kind of, get the FIFA name out all over the place. So they don't want to just be locked down to EA. They want to explore other venues, other like tournaments, esports, pushing it onto mobile, pushing it into web. NFTs are mooted at one point, and it's like, please don't, for the love of God. Although, if any big game publisher is going to get into NFTs, it's going to be EA, I suppose. EA, for their part, are like, we've been really good with the FIFA license, and we're also keen to explore other avenues with the FIFA license. And I think that there's kind of so the two ways you can look at it is that FIFA are putting out this ridiculous price tag to pretty much just scare EA away, or the other way to look at it is that if you want to be the exclusive license holder, then this is how much you need to pay for it to sort of offset us not being able to, pursue other publishers or other avenues or other, like, any other thing that they would want to do. This is just a big mess, big pissing contest between the two of them, and it's kind of particularly galling because FIFA itself is meant to be a non-profit organization, and they're throwing around like $2.5 billion just to use their name in video games. I find it unlikely all that money is going into football. I find it more likely it's going into the pockets of those at the top of that organization. Anyway, so FIFA says these discussions will help provide a range of suitable parties with specialist capabilities to actively shape the best possible experiences and offerings. So this is them trying to say that we don't want EA to have exclusive ownership of the license. And if they want to have exclusive ownership of the license, then give us double what you're already paying. It's very much a negotiating tactic, kind of out of spite, is what it sounds like to me. Gaming and esports are the fastest growing media verticals on the planet. So I just wanted to put that in because could you find a more disgusting term than media vertical? For discussing video games. Or for discussing anything media vertical. It's a pretty terrible term, and I hope I never see it ever again. It's a bit like vertical slice of gameplay. It's the same kind of corporate jargon that they make up because they don't have their own jargon, so they have to make shit up so they can feel better. And the last thing is just talking about FIFA, or not FIFA, EA. God, they almost feel synonymous, but they are actually different. They are actually different companies. They're pointing out that they had looked at changing the name of the game so that they wouldn't be beholden to FIFA and the license, and also pointing out that they have licenses with the actual players themselves, with the players union, for their likenesses and things like that. So they wouldn't necessarily need FIFA to still have character likenesses and that kind of thing. And they do have licenses with a bunch of other companies and things like that, or leagues and what have you. So they would probably lose out on like the big headlining stuff, like the World Cup, the Premiership, that kind of thing. But they would still have like other leagues and whatever, and they would still have the likenesses of players. So while they mightn't be allowed to call them by the team name or have them play in the particular league that they play in, they could still have all those players' faces and just change the jersey or whatever, change the team that they play for, and we'll probably still get away with it. Anyway, it's just two massively overvalued companies. Like, it's ridiculous to call FIFA a non-profit. It's a fucking corporation, really, at this point, just pissing at each other to see who has the strongest stream. That's really all this is. But I think from a player standpoint and a consumer or customer standpoint, it would actually benefit them for EA not to have the exclusive license, honestly, because it's never good for there to be any kind of exclusivity in that sort of realm. IMO. Okay, so some Nintendo news. So the Nintendo Switch Online and expansion subscription will cost $50 a year. So that is up from 20, so more than double. If you want to have the new expansion stuff for the Nintendo Plus. Nintendo Plus? Good. Sure. Nintendo Live, whatever you want to call it. This was announced during a Nintendo Direct a while ago, but you get Nintendo 64 games and Mega Drive titles. Select number, not all of them, it's like 6 maybe of each, for an additional €50, or not an additional $30 a year. So that's tacking it on to the already $20 that you would pay for Nintendo Switch Online. You're not getting much. You're really just getting access to these games, and the games themselves are pretty well known, which means you could probably find them somewhere else without having to pay for it. The kind of big headline item is the new Animal Crossing DLC, in that you'll get it for free. You're not exactly getting it for free. It's included in this expansion, but obviously you have to pay for the expansion, so you're not exactly getting it for free. Luckily, that is available separately for just a one-off give us money thing for the DLC. Animal Crossing did have an Animal Crossing Direct earlier this week. I haven't been playing that game for so long that I just didn't feel I knew enough about the current state of the game to actually report on the new stuff that they've added. But from what I've seen around Twitter and so on, it seems like people are pretty happy with it, and kind of less happy about this it being included in the Nintendo Switch Online expansion. But it was later clarified that you can also just buy it one-off kind of thing. Right now, this additional more than double, 1.5 times the current subscription cost, it doesn't seem like it's worth it. It's sort of starting to approach Xbox Live, PlayStation Plus prices at the moment, and they give out free games every month. Free, like current gen-ish games at the moment. Like, for this to be viable, Nintendo would be having to give out Switch games basically every month if they wanted to keep up. And one, there's not enough of them. And two, Nintendo don't give away shit for free, so I don't see that happening right now. I guess if you have no other possible way of playing Ocarina of Time, if your Google doesn't work for some reason, you have no other way of playing Ocarina of Time, I guess this is an avenue for you. But even then, I would absolutely rather just buy the game. Like, I would rather buy the game instead of paying a subscription for it. Like, just let me do that. Anyway, ridiculous markup on Nintendo Switch Online. That is, one, already kind of shit, in the first place. Like, Nintendo Online stuff is usually not great, and they don't even have voice chat. So it's already not a great deal, and they've just made it worse. It's not clear yet what kind of pricing structure they're going to have for like monthly or 3 monthly or that kind of thing. This is just a yearly one. Additionally, the family pack has also gone up quite a bit, even more than 1.5 times. It was $35 for family plan and is now $80 family membership. There's a Eurogamer article that also gives out the prices there, and it's like £35 sterling is the new cost versus the 50-year one. 50-year versus the $50 one. So $50 in the US, £35 sterling in the UK. And what do you think euro will be? Which of those numbers do you think they'll match? Because they're definitely not going to do an exchange rate thing for that. Because exchange rate wise, it should be $40. €40. I guarantee it won't be. It'll be 50. It'll be €50 just because fuck you exchange rates. Because that's how they do it. They just match the number and they never actually match the value. Continuing with Nintendo Switch Online and N64 games will have 60Hz version in English. So, in English language version, rather. European. No, English language version. Okay. This isn't a big deal for any of you watching from the US because it won't affect you. This is for European regions. European games back in the CRT days, when people played games on their CRT TVs, ran at 50Hz instead of 60Hz. And that was always kind of shit because they always had a weird hiccup when they had to sync up the two game codes with 60Hz and 50Hz. So it never ran well. Basically, most of the European PAL version games were a tiny bit slower than NTSC, which would have been the American one. And that has largely been done away with. Vast majority of games are now at minimum 60Hz, and a lot of games are even higher than that. This had to do with just how TV standards were at the time between the two regions. That has largely been fixed with like globalization and like TVs being exported everywhere, and the same thing. Everyone has agreed to a sort of general specification for their TVs, so it's not really an issue. But it was an issue at the time of the N64 and N64 games that would be available in the European region on this new Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass. There was a concern that they would be the 50Hz version, the PAL version, which we're like, no, please no, for the love of God, we do not want to go back to that. So the way it's going to work is the English language versions will use the NTSC 60Hz thing. They're basically the US version is what they're going to use. But if you want to play in French or German or any of the FIGS languages and so on, FIGS Plus, that's French, Italian, German, Spanish, etc. that tend to just get added in. They're not going through all of the different letters and country codes. They will still be PAL. So they're not going to essentially rebuild the NTSC version to allow for these additional languages. They're just going to use the source code as it was for French, German, as it was at the time when the game was released. So if you want to play at 60Hz, you'll have to play in English or Japanese. Those are your two options, pretty much. If you want to play in the language that you actually understand, you'll probably end up having to play in 50Hz. So that sucks, but there you go. They're not going to remake the game just for that. Okay, so this is kind of older news that's had updates. So updates, I guess. Union pissed about meager Activision Blizzard settlement, demands fairness hearing. So 2 weeks ago? Last week? I forget. Time is meaningless in this abyss. Anyway, Activision and the Equal Employment Opportunity something with a C, Commission, it's right there, I should just read it. Anyway, they settled for like Activision allegations of sexual harassment and other horrible shit, and they settled for like a penny, basically. If you compared the actual settlement price, $18 million, versus just the profit Activision Blizzard pulled in last year, it's less than a penny. Like, it's nothing. They basically paid nothing. They got a slap on the wrist, pretty much. Not even a slap on the wrist. Likely caressed their wrist, pretty much. And the Communication Workers of America Union, not happy about it. Really, really not happy about it. I've linked the letter they sent and the lawsuit that they've eventually filed. Holy shit, are they not happy anyway? So the background, I should probably just read this one. The background is that both the Department for Fair Employment and Housing, which is the California lawsuit, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a federal commission, so that's the whole country, engaged in parallel investigations into Activision Blizzard, culminating in two separate lawsuits. California filed its lawsuit first, and the EEOC followed. EEOC and Activision Blizzard announced that they had come to a resolution and presented an $18 million settlement in the form of a consent decree to the courts. A consent decree is you can get this money if you agree to ABCD, whatever is in their decree. And most of that decree is you can have this money if you just shut up and don't talk to California. That was pretty much it. The DFEH took umbrage with the consent decree and filed a motion to intervene, which the EEOC opposed. Why? Should be asking questions about that one. And the California Workers of America Union, Communication Workers of America's Union, has now joined in the fun with its own objections against the EEOC settlement. So basically, the California Department for Fair Employment and Housing and the Communications Workers of America Union both are against this settlement because it's nothing. You're well aware of what's happened in Activision Blizzard, and you're basically letting them away with it, pretty much. Earlier in the week, it was found that when the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing pushed to intervene in this settlement and to sort of be like, no, the judge denied their ex-parte intervention, which means California Department of Fair Employment and Housing cannot represent themselves in this interjection, whatever way you want to put it, basically because there were lawyers on the EEOC who then subsequently left and joined the California Department and also helped in that investigation, so there is a conflict of interest there, which is a big problem for California, because it doesn't help their case and kind of helps Activision to get away with these things anyway. Communication Workers of America sent a letter and they demand a fairness hearing, and the site listed a big list. I'm doing well. I'm really doing well today. Anyway, a bunch of criticisms, including Activision Blizzard workers were not consulted, the lack of promised documentation, the complete absence of the employee notice that the consent decree promises. They didn't tell anybody about this whole consent decree. The paltry $450 per person legal fund. $450 for sexual harassment. This is really the crux of why they're so pissed off. The lack of clarity as to who will be handling the settlement claims. Comparatively minuscule payment. The fact that the EEOC claims Activision Blizzard is not being punished despite the company's obvious malfeasance, obviously punishable malpractice. That seems wrong. Might be a misquote anyway, and a lot of procedurals though. So there's a big list of them here. I've also linked the actual letter itself if you want to read through it. It starts on page 6 and goes on to list all of their grievances basically, and they're pretty good. It's pretty scathing, to be honest. I'll read a couple of them. I'll read the ones that are quoted. Anyway, this proposed consent decree seems to be an attempt to preempt the parallel suit brought by the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which sure seems like it. California law provides far greater remedies, and the California Department of Fair seems much more willing to aggressively and effectively pursue litigation. Please explain why this consent decree was suddenly entered into shortly after the DFEH's complaint was filed and has become active. Do you plan to seek input from the DFEH? Why was this not coordinated with them? So basically, this consent decree sure sounds like you're trying to just stop the DFEH investigation, which is going to be considerably more aggressive and will actually pursue litigation versus here's $0 to make it go away. You know, there's some things you could probably say there. The consent decree seems to cover defendants as well as their parents, subsidiaries, officers, directors, agents, successors, and assigns. Does this consent decree then absolve the individuals from any further liability? Please explain. How will notice be given to them to assure compliance? Basically, this is extremely broad and seems to prevent any further liability, i.e. the California lawsuit. Is that legally enforceable, etc.? We would also like to know how the EEOC will determine whether someone is an eligible claimant as defined in the consent decree. Please explain how you intend to determine the list of potential claimants. What about misclassified workers under state or federal law? As I have indicated, CWA is in contact with a large number of individuals. The DFEH is in contact with many individuals. How do you intend to incorporate any individuals that we know about, former employees, and all people who are adversely affected by the illegal practices of defendant, so that they are entitled to submit a claim form? Basically, where are you getting the list of claimants from? Who's going to be eligible for it? How are you deciding how they are eligible, and so on? These things are not listed. Basically, two different, or as is cited in this article, that having the California department was already bad enough, but also having this union come in on top of it, saying that this settlement is bullshit, is probably not going to end well for Activision. But I guess we'll see. This is basically the government versus a corporation, so this will drag on for forever, pretty much, until everyone has died or has forgotten it. And that's the PDF. If you want, it'll be linked in the description. So Aeon Must Die, we talked about this 2 months ago, maybe longer. Was a game that was shown off at Sony State of Play like 2 years ago, and it looked really, really cool and people were really interested in it, but it then transpired that there's some legal bullshit going on. So if you've forgotten, the people who originally worked on the title Aeon Must Die and worked on the trailer that was shown off that got a lot of buzz claimed that they were never paid for it, and that the publisher and one of the co-owners, I guess, of the developer were essentially trying to steal the IP and push people out. A year later, the newly formed Mishura team, which is an offshoot of the people who worked on Aeon Must Die and kind of got pushed out and or left, depending on what way you want to look at it, claimed issues were unresolved as Focus and Limestone began promoting Aeon Must Die again. So Limestone would be the name of the original developer. Depending on how you look at it, the company, it would seem that the developers who made up that company have largely left, but there you go. Both companies claimed that they co-owned the IP and denied reports of commercial. So that's Focus and Limestone claiming that they co-own the IP of Aeon Must Die, and the Mishura team, who are allegedly the people who worked on the trailer and the assets and stuff using that, saying, no, you don't. we own it because you never paid us for it, basically. In its latest statement, Mishura Games acknowledged that Limestone and Focus do own some of the IP, but maintained they do not have the full rights and authorization to publish and distribute the game. According to relevant laws, the IP of a creative product is transferred to the new owner based on a mutual contract which would include payment for rights and or services. So, i.e., you can have the IP when you pay us. You haven't paid us, therefore you don't have the IP. Mishura asserted that Alexei Nashor, I'm not going to be able to pronounce his name, Nahorishkin? Maybe? Nahorishkin? Sure. Co-founder and former CEO of Limestone Games, now at Mishura Games, did not sign anything releasing the rights to the Aeon Must Die IP. So basically, I never signed a contract that gave you the IP. It's still mine. Pretty much. The studio is calling for proof from Limestone that he was paid for work done. I'm going to say Alexei instead of his surname because I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. Is alleging he was never paid. This was later pointed on that another artist, when the YouTube trailer was put up again a second time, also took it down for content claim, saying that the IP regarding my work for this trailer still belongs to me because you never paid me, so it's still mine. Mishura requested Focus and Limestone to produce a contract signed by the artist to prove they own the IP to his work and proof that he had been paid. So again, where's the receipts? You haven't paid us. YouTube later restored the trailer because no legal proceedings were taken. Mishura basically said, we don't have the money to actually fight a legal claim here, pretty much. We're just gonna litigate this in like the court of public. There's another way to say that, but my brain isn't working today. I'm sorry. Focus and Limestone released a statement to say that they co-own the IP. Since signing of the publishing agreement, no party, legal or natural person could appropriate, steal or exploit the IP by its own will. Limestone employees, Focus employees and their service providers have duly transferred all their IP, yada yada yada. There's something about... in a different article of the same thing. Sorry. Anyway, there's a thing here about him being previous owner of... Okay, it's later in the article. We'll get there in a second. The publisher claimed that upon employee's resignation, it conducted a social and legal audit, and that audit did not confirm any of the accusations leveled against the management of Limestone. We'll get there in a second too. It also claimed that IGDA, the International Game Developers Association, also conducted its own independent investigation, which also did not confirm the charges against management of Limestone. Games industry contacted IGDA and confirmed the investigation had been conducted, but were unable to comment further. We'll get there in a second. Okay. In Mishura's statement, studio disputed Focus's claims of independent investigations, asserting that even though contact was established with us to conduct an investigation, no actual investigation took place. We do not believe for a moment they happened, and even if they did, an investigation of conflict that only investigates one side is not an independent investigation. So they're alleging these independent audits you didn't happen. They reached out to us for contact details, and that was the end of it. So yeah, they basically only got one side of the story, is what they're saying, allegedly. Even they potentially got zero sides of the story, and were just paid to say that they didn't find it, but we'll get there in a second. Focus and Limestone have their own statement, basically saying all employees who worked for Limestone Games signed an employment contract providing a formal assignment of intellectual property rights for their work on the project. You are paid for work. If you are not paid for it, it's not work. That's how it works in the legal sense. So that contract would be void if it can't be proven that they were paid. Alexi is no exception. He was hired as creative director of Limestone Games. Again, something that he disputes because he was never technically hired. He founded Limestone Games. He did not hire himself, basically. Is that I owned the company. I was never hired technically as creative director. I just was creative director because it was my company. Anyway, Focus has no intention to release publicly to the mass audience any extract of this agreement, so they're not going to release contracts because contracts are meant to be confidential, and legally they are protected from something like that. But also, you don't have to release it to the mass audience. You can just release it to the people who asked you to release it to, and presumably you would have a copy of a contract you signed with that person. It's completely within their legal rights to request the copy of it, if it exists, which it might not. Or it might not say what they think it says, anyway. And then they tried to do a kind of gotcha of Alexi is also still a shareholder in Limestone Games up to this very day, which again he says, yeah, because I own the fucking thing. Of course I'm still a shareholder. I wanted to sell my shares, sure. Sell my shares, but they were offering like 10% of what they were actually worth. So he was like, I'm gonna fucking do that. Okay, anyway, it's a big mess. It's a he said kind of thing with Mishura Games and the original developers being like, we still own the IP, you shouldn't be selling it, you don't have the rights to do it, and so on. And Focus and what's left of Limestone basically saying, no, you signed a contract, we do own the IP. So this could be which one of you believe. You don't have enough information to believe one over the other, except problem background. I kind of wish game industry have gone into it, but they didn't. Focus Home Interactive, now known as Focus Entertainment, have done this before. They've done this before with another developer called Frogwares, who made The Sinking City, and they partnered with Focus Home Interactive to publish it. And they did manage to publish it. You can it's even available for purchase. But the problem was, Frogwares then wanted to publish it somewhere else. I forget the exact legal nature of what happened, but it was, or maybe it was Focus Home. I think Focus Home Interactive wanted to publish it somewhere else, and Frogwares were like, "No, we own the IP. You don't get to do that." And Focus were like, "No, we own the IP because we published this." And Frogwares were like, "No, you don't. We never signed anything about it. It is long-standing company policy that we never said sell out our IP ever. We always own our own IP." Big legal stink about it. Focus Home Interactive then published a version of The Sinking City to Steam that did not have Frogwares credited or listed or anything like that. Big legal stink about that. Steam had to take it down, and then later on, Frogwares published their own version of The Sinking City onto PC, and there's a PlayStation 5 version and Xbox Series version. And there's an issue there because the SKU versions aren't the same. You can't upgrade from the PS4 version to the PS5 version. That's more of an aside. The point is, Focus have done this before. So it's possible they're trying to pull the same shit again. And they're either trying to pull the same shit again, or they don't understand their own contracts, which way you want to look at it. But they have precedent, let's put it that way. If you want to learn more about it, Matt McMuscles did a YouTube, despite the name, it's actually a very good video. Did a YouTube, he has a video series called What Happened, and there's a What Happened on The Sinking City, and you should check that out. The game itself was like, okay, decent enough. It has some problems, has some good stuff. Frogwares make interesting games that are like have technical issues usually, but it's an interesting title. But the whole legal thing around it is really interesting. You should check that video out if you have time and or are interested. But I did find this last update, which is really interesting, and that game industry reached out to IGDA about their alleged investigation that Mishura Games claim never happened. They were just contacted and that was the end of it. And IGDA, you can say higher up here somewhere, confirmed the investigation had been conducted, but were unable to comment further. And then later on, they came back to say, actually, that investigation was cancelled. So you have Focus saying that this, independent, workers' union said nothing bad happened here. And this independent workers' union are going, yeah, I mean, we can't say because we fucking never got a chance or never investigated it. We were told by our parent company to be like, we're not in this for litigation. We are, we're there to be promote ethics within our industry. We do not conduct investigations into legal disputes and so on. They're there mostly for career resources and community stuff for developers as opposed to litigation things. There are professional outfits that are much better at that. So yeah, Focus saying that IGDA also did not confirm the charges. So technically they're kind of right. They did not confirm the charges against management because the investigation never happened. There's no way for them to do that. What you could also say is that they didn't confirm or deny, kind of thing. It's like the investigation didn't happen. So they are free to say that they did not confirm the charges against because they didn't. Technically, it's a very shitty way to go about things, but they are technically correct, the best kind of correct. Okay, last thing for this absolute shit show of industry bullshit video. I am completely out of it today. I'm sorry. Google countersues Epic Games for breach of contract. So there's a bunch of stuff in this story, in this article from Games Industry, but the easiest thing to sum up it is that it's basically the Android version of the Epic versus Apple thing. In that Epic released Fortnite on Google Play Store through the Google Play Store services, in that users would have to download the app through the Google Play Store, right? That means Google gets a cut. That's how it works. 30% or whatever it is. Pretty sure it's 30%. And Epic slipped in a pay directly to Fortnite option, or pay directly to Epic option into Fortnite. So they would sidestep Google's billing service. Exactly the same thing they did with the App Store, which led to the Epic versus Apple lawsuit. And wouldn't you know it, it's leading to the Epic versus Google lawsuit now. Same deal, exact same problem. Epic trying to say that Android have a monopoly with the Google Play Store. Google Play saying you entered into a contract when you decided to publish your game through the Google Play Store. That is the contract. You are breaching your contract by doing this. The real problem here is that while they sort of have a point, with the App Store in that it does have a bit of a monopoly, and the judge kind of agreed in that he basically said, he or she, sorry, I forget now, basically said that Apple have to allow for optional payment options in the App Store. So basically they should allow for different payment options instead of just going directly through Apple kind of thing. And whether or not they put that in, we don't know, because it's under appeal and so on, and you might never see the result of that. The problem when they try to address the same thing to Google and Android and the Google Play Store is that the Google Play Store isn't a walled garden. There are other ways to get Android apps. You can sideload them. For instance, people could go directly to Epic's website and get the Fortnite app there. You could go through the Samsung Galaxy Store and get the app there. In fact, it is even mentioned in Google's side of the lawsuit, in that they give examples of Epic Games itself, which initially distributed the Android version of Fortnite via the Samsung Galaxy Store and its own website before launching on Google Play. Before they decided to pull this shit, they were already, avoiding the 30% cut that they had an issue with. Like, they clearly just showed it could be done, which is not something you can do on App Store, because iOS absolutely do only have the one legitimate store, whereas Android is kind of open. Amazon have their own one, Samsung have their own one, Huawei have their own one. You can also just go directly to people's websites. You can fucking get them off Dropbox. APKs can be installed, sideloaded as it's called, without having to go through the Google Play Store. It is entirely up to you. There's a little thing that pops up to say this is from a third-party thing, and you're, install at your own risk, sort of thing, which is not something Apple does. But that doesn't help Epic's argument on the whole Google Play Store prevents healthy competition, because they're not a monopoly. So it's there. You can get in there if you want. You can install other stores and so on. So I don't know. I really don't think they have a leg here. They sort of had a point against Apple. They really don't have a point against Android. Wait, look at it. Anyway, so we'll finish off with some dumb stuff. So Ubisoft announced Ghost Recon Frontline, which is going to be a Battle Royale thing with the Tom Clancy Ghost Recon branding, more or less, and have pretty much zero to do with Ghost Recon. As mentioned last week, Ghost Recon was more of a kind of tactical stealth, kind of fairly slow-paced game. It really wasn't like a run-and-gun Battle Royale sort of thing. And it turns out I wasn't the only person who thought that. And because of that, Ubisoft are postponing the closed beta for Ghost Recon Frontline indefinitely. And as Luke Plunkett puts out here, the game nobody asked for. So they released a tweet to basically say, thanks for your interest, but we're going to delay it, whatever. We have decided it is best to postpone the closed test for Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Frontline. Public reception to its reveal was swift and merciless. So yes, it has been obliterated on the trailer. It's heavily downvoted. Reddit has been pretty much on fire with it as well. There's some choice tweets or replies to this, basically. How about cancel the Battle Royale and make a real Ghost Recon game? This game flies in the face of us Ghost Recon fans, since Breakpoint, yada yada. Breakpoint is their kind of open world thing that's also not really Ghost Recon. And when it was initially announced, I was like, cool, an open world, but also heavily technical stealth game. I'm like, yes, please. But once you got it, it's like, this is third-person Far Cry. You know, like a lot of their games have become. A lot of their games have become Assassin's Creed, or like Far Cry is Assassin's Creed but with guns. You know, or Assassin's Creed is Far Cry but without guns, whatever way you want to put it. And Ghost Recon was basically Far Cry but third person. You know, might as well look at it that way. Or Assassin's Creed but with guns. That's another way to do it. Anyway, in general, the Ghost Recon fans are like, make an actual Ghost Recon game and don't just make a battle royale and tack on Ghost Recon to it. And I guess Ubisoft got the message. Debatable. I don't know. To be honest, launching a battle royale now is a giant waste of time. People have, unless you're going to do something very, very different, right? There's really no point in doing it now, because what is this doing different to Fortnite or Apex or PUBG or any of those games? You know, what's different here? If it was straight up a like super stealthy battle royale, they might have something there, but it's not. you know it's not gonna be. Okay, so great one here. Company that told Sony go ahead and sue us gets sued. It's like that really, really old news story. It's like, man's last words, what are you gonna do, stab me? Get stabbed. Like, it's like that exact thing. The company that told Sony to go ahead and sue us has pulled replacement PlayStation 5 plates from sale after Sony threatened to sue them. So this is company DBrand, who are going to make dark plates. PlayStation 5, if you're not familiar, the PlayStation 5 has two white plates on the side of it that are actually kind of easily replaceable. You can just take them off. They're not even that hard to get off. And this company was basically going to sell third-party darker versions to make it essentially a black PlayStation 5. And right on their website, right at the top, reads, go ahead, sue us. DBrand said it subsequently received a letter from Sony threatening legal action, and it has now complied with the demand. So yeah, fuck around and find out, pretty much. That's all it is to it. They've gone on to say that, you know, this is only temporary until we can get our legal... Like, you absolute fucking idiots. Like, they do make a point in later in that, you know, it shouldn't be only Sony who get to decide who can like customize their PlayStation 5 and what parts you can replace and so on. Like, once you own the product, it's yours and you should be able to do whatever you want with it. But also, you literally said go ahead and sue us, you dumbasses. Okay, last one. So this is actually kind of interesting, and it may or may not belong in dumb stuff, but there's no really other place I can put it, so there you go. Old video shows the birth of Mortal Kombat's Get Over Here move. So Ed Boon tweeted out on like the 30th anniversary of Mortal Kombat, and this was like a mocap rotoscope session for the original Mortal Kombat. If you're not familiar, rotoscoping is taking a real person, as you can see here, the actor playing Scorpion, and they would more or less just cut him out like Photoshop and use those animations in-game. That was rotoscoping before mocap was a thing. So before they had those 3D cameras that could follow the little white balls on suits, they did this. They literally just filmed a person and cut him out and put him in the game. But this is showing how they basically just invented Scorpion's harpoon attack, like on the spot, like in the middle of a session. Wasn't planned out or anything, and they're just, this is all of them just workshopping the whole thing. Like, where should the arm come out? How quickly should the animation happen? You know, how does he pull him? What animations do we use when they get hit, and so on. There's some really interesting stuff here in that, like, they point out that they wanted the harpoon to come out from the chest so that, or from chest height, so that characters could duck it if they had enough time. And they also wanted to make sure that the wind-up was sufficiently quick enough that the attack would come out fast. There's obviously like a set number of frames that the animation would go through before the attack comes out, kind of thing. So they want it to be kind of fast. So you can see like he's going through some motions, but they do eventually like kind of speed it up and kind of hone in on it. And then because they didn't want to get all of the actors in to make like custom animations for getting hit by the harpoon, they just reuse a bunch of animations they already have, like the first couple of frames of getting knocked down, or the fatality dizzy animation. They just use that for when you got hit and that kind of thing. So it's like a really neat look into development of a pretty well-known character move. And the idea that it wasn't exactly planned, they just sort of went, hey, that'd be a cool move, and just went with it, I think is pretty interesting. You can also see, oh, it's gone now, but you can also see later on, or earlier, you can see like the square he has to stay in, the height of like character models, so he needs to be looking at this white dot, or this white thing on a stick. They kind of still do that in mocap. Like, here's your spot, this is where you'll have to stand in the scene, you know, find your mark kind of thing. Like, the actors probably know what that's about, but finding something to look at that's probably not going to be there when you need to act, you know, is a common problem for CG and mocap and stuff. So they would have a tennis ball on a stick that's at the height you need to look at kind of thing, or they might have an actor in place and, you know, green screen him out or something like that. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting. And there's more in that entire Twitter thread. There's actually a good bit that Ed Boon goes into about that, and I thought it was really cool. Anyway, that was the news for 11th to 17th of October 2021. No big news story, really. Kind of one interesting new release, which is The Good Life. Getting kind of mixed reviews, which is not unexpected for a sweary game. That tends to happen. He usually has some really interesting ideas, but can't really deliver on the technical front is usually the issue with sweary games. So it'll probably have a bunch of hilarious bugs, but otherwise will probably be an interesting title. He at least comes up with some interesting ideas. And then the Crysis Remastered Trilogy, maybe not huge for people who've already played Crysis, but I haven't played it, so it might be interesting. And Crysis 1 had been remastered before, so it's basically just pretty much a re-release of that, but Crysis 2 and 3 hadn't been remastered before, so that's the first time, and hopefully last time, they'll be remastered, but I don't know, maybe it won't be. Maybe when we have like holograms and like 8K resolution, some of these games will have to be remastered again. You know, if we have like proper full room VR setups and stuff like that, you might have to remaster the games and so on. Who knows? Anyway, elsewhere on the channel, I have finished A Plague Tale Innocence. The very last part went up on Friday, so that LP is now done, so you can check it out now in full if you want to. Commentary and no commentary versions are up. I will be beginning the Observer System Redux LP this week, and that will probably have a pretty quick turnaround. It's not that the game is short, it's that I kind of want it done for Halloween. You know, I kind of want the last part to come out on Halloween, basically. So I'll be probably looking to do a pretty fast turnaround of that, and I'll be starting work on my Games of May video, which again is obviously long overdue, but I kind of need to, you know, get through these games. So you might be seeing one-shot videos, you know, for a bit videos of Resident Evil or Call of the Sea or Cozy Grove. You probably won't see one for Mass Effect because I've finished it. I've gotten 3 platinums. I don't really need to go back to it right now. But you'll see stuff for the others because I haven't actually played them yet. If there's anything else you want to see, do let me know. If you like this video and so on, leave me a comment. What do you think of the whole Aeon must die thing? Is it incredibly complicated? Does it look like a horrible legal mess to you? Because it sure looks like it to me. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.